Hello, everyone. My name is Bowman Sonona. I am a freshman at the University of Michigan, and today I will be talking about the biggest rivalry in American sports. So, what is the biggest rivalry in American sports? That answer is simple: the game. The biggest rivalry in American sports, it or the game, is a football game between the Michigan Wolverines and the Ohio State Buckeyes. So when talking about the biggest rivalry, we need to define a rivalry and what makes a great rivalry. Three words that come to mind when I think of factors for a great rivalry are history, competitiveness, and location. Michigan versus Ohio State has all three. For example, for history, their first game was in 1879, more than 130 years ago. Competitiveness. These two teams are very competitive, holding a record of 61, 51, and 6, favoring the University of Michigan Wolverines. And then geographical location. They are only 161 miles apart. But what makes the game different? You see, Michigan has had several rivals that have all those same factors and importance to be great rivals. Teams like Chicago, teams like Michigan State, Minnesota have all been, and some are still Michigan's rivals, but they're not the game. So, what does make the game against the Ohio State Buckeyes different? Today, I will talk to you about the different people and events that shape this rivalry into what it is today, and why 143 years later, after their first meeting, it is still considered the biggest rivalry in American sports. When talking about the rivalry, we must look at the very rich and very eventful history of the Michigan versus Ohio State rivalry. Starting off with the Toledo War. Many people believe that this rivalry did not start on the football field, but it started over a war. You know, a football rivalry is going to be good when it started over a war. So let's talk about Toledo War. The Toledo War was a war between Michigan and Ohio from 1835 to 1836. They engaged in a short conflict over a strip of land from Toledo around the Toledo area, separating the two states. Although the war ended and the land was eventually given to the state of Ohio, the hatred lived on between Michiganders and Ohioans. And they finally had a place to show their hatred: the football field. If you look at the picture here, this is the strip of land that Michigan and Ohio were fighting for. And then, although there was a battle, it is said that no one died in that war. The first meetings, very important. The first meeting was in 1879. Michigan won that game. And due to Michigan starting many years before Ohio State, Michigan had a heavy advantage in the earliest meetings. It wasn't much of a rivalry back in those days. Michigan won 19 of the first 24 games, showing their dominance and beating up the Buckeyes in most of their matchups. However, Ohio State made a huge jump in the series after their great idea of hiring coach Francis Schmidt in the year 1934. They beat the Wolverines 4 games in a row after hiring him. Francis Schmidt went in there and he wanted to beat the Wolverines, and he did just that. He was sick of losing to the Wolverines, and he made it clear to his team that the Wolverines were very beatable. One famous quote by him, as he said, was that they put their pants on one leg at a time, just like everybody else. This also started a tradition that still continues on today, as players from Ohio State get a gold pendant shaped like a pair of pants when they beat Michigan. Different pendant every year, if you see in the picture right there. Just a gold pair of pants. Very important when talking about the history of this rivalry is the 10-Year War. The 10-Year War was one of if not the greatest time of this rivalry, of the Michigan history ever. This was a 10-year window from 1969 to 1978, where the rivalry was razor thin. Teams were very equally matched during this time, and there was a lot of drama. Michigan beat Ohio State during this 10-year war with a record of 5-4-1. This war had some of the most heated moments in the rivalry, Heisman Trophy winners playing, great coaches, unexpected results, and a lot of hype and drama around every single one of the games. Wow, the 1969 game. The 1969 game was the kickoff of the 10-year war. The Buckeyes went to this game as the AP number 1 ranked team in the country. They were also the returning national champions. Michigan was ranked number 12 in the AP polls heading into this game. The Buckeyes were a very, very heavy favorite. This was also the year after Ohio State beat Michigan 50-14, and Coach Hayes said he went for two late after the game was already proven to be over because he couldn't go for three. The Buckeyes were fighting for a national championship, while the Wolverines were going to the game looking for a spot in the Rose Bowl and a Big Ten championship with the win. The Michigan Wolverines shocked the world. They beat the number 1 ranked Buckeyes with a first-year head coach by a score of 24-12. This kicked off the 10-year war and a great coaching rivalry as well. Michigan's Bo Schembechler versus Ohio State's Woody Hayes. Here we go into Bo versus Woody. Bo and Woody were the two head coaches for their respective teams during the 10-year war, which makes this rivalry between coaches far more interesting is that Schembechler was once a coach under Woody Hayes. These coaches often credit for elevating this Big Ten rivalry. These coaches are often credited for elevating what was once just a little Big Ten rivalry into the national light. They are responsible for the 10-year war, and they're really responsible for how this rivalry is seen and how well each of these teams did after. Now we go into the 1973 game. 1973, Michigan and Ohio State have a lot of controversy and bad blood between these two teams, which I'll teach you right now. And the 1973 game perfectly exemplifies the hatred these teams had for each other in the heart of the 10-year war. Before the game started, when Ohio State ran for the tunnel, they didn't go to their sideline. They took a detour and decided to tear down Michigan's banner. A scuffle then started midfield when Michigan players saw this. Ohio State tried this again in 1977. However, we were far more prepared. When Ohio State tried to do it again, Michigan had people down there to defend their banner. There was a lot of fighting and a lot of bad blood between these teams. The 1973 game also had a lot of serious implications on the line. An appearance in the Rose Bowl and a Big Ten championship. However, the game ended in a tie. This meant that there would be a vote to determine who would go to the Rose Bowl. Many people believed that Michigan was going to be picked. A lot of people believed they had a better team. Even Coach Woody Hayes was quoted saying that if the committee believed that Michigan could go, then they should go. However, the committee then chose to send Ohio State to the Rose Bowl. Michigan was very jealous and upset. They believed they were the better team and they deserved to go. They defended that they did not lose a game and they were not being rewarded for it. The game of the century. The 2006 game between these two is often called the game of the century. This is a historic game because this was the first time the two rivals came into the game ranked number 1 and number 2 in the country, respectively. This game was highly covered, and the hype around watching the game was the highest it's ever been for a game in the series. With a big championship and the national championship games on the line, everyone wanted to tune in to see how these two teams would match up. It was a high-powered offensive game, and the Ohio State Buckeyes came away with a victory by a score of 42-39. While many people believe that they had a potential rematch after the game in the BCS National Championship, but it never happened. After this game of the century, Michigan dropped to number 3 in the rankings and were not allowed to play for a BCS national title. Ohio State went on to the national championship and they lost to Florida, and Michigan went on to lose in the Rose Bowl. And then we move into the modern era. The modern era has proven to be very exciting. Since the split of the Big Ten and the introduction of the CFP, these two teams' meetings have a lot on the line in terms of playoff implications and Big Ten championship spots. In the modern era, much of these two teams' meetings have been very entertaining and great additions to their already illustrious rivalry. While the Ohio State Buckeyes won 8 in a row from 2012 to 2019, the Wolverines have won the last 3 games in this rivalry. And then all 3 of these games holding serious CFP implications. The Wolverines made it to the CFP twice in a row in the two previous years for their first times ever. This rivalry is now really strong. Conclusion. As you can see, the game is far more than just a game. This is Ohio State versus Michigan. This is generations of fueled bitterness between two schools. This is Bo versus Woody. This is the 10-year war. This is the fans going against each other. This is Michiganders and Ohioans battling in Fleo War. This is a battle between two schools who put their pants on the same way. This is the game. And here are a couple of the sources that I used.